hidden pandemic, COVID-19, and increased criminal activity.
I believe that everyone who's here, who's watching us right now, will agree that this topic sounds really intriguing. And to try to uncover what is behind all of this, we would like to invite to the stage a moderator. Please give it up to Dave Crane, international speaker and mentor. Give him a big hand. 1, 2, 3. Be more enthusiastic. Clap louder. Thank you. Also, please give a big hand to Dr. Franklin Cachia, Director at Tax Regulated Industries. Give him a big hand, please. And also, put your hands together for Davinia Kutajar, partner at WH Partners. Thank you so much, Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Oh, it works. Look, there you go. A round of applause for our amazing moderator. Give it up, ladies and gents. Give it up. Wonderful. Right, this microphone's really good, by the way. So we're going to start with a bit of karaoke. No, I'm joking. How's everybody doing so far? Wonderful. We're going to be touching on a huge subject, which I think for many people has been a bit of a scary one. And I think after this, hopefully, we'll be able to enlighten you on why it's important that you do pay attention to it. The subject we're going to be looking at is the hidden pandemic, which is after COVID-19, there's been increased criminal activity. Now, to join me, and I would normally say my partners in crime, but that sounds wrong in this particular panel, but joining us to explain exactly what they do and how they know so much about it are my esteemed colleagues. Would you like to introduce yourselves and tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Franklin. I'm a lawyer by profession and also an international tax lawyer, and I specialize in anti-money laundering and compliance.
There you go. And also...
At CSB Group in Malta.
Say it again?
At CSB Group in Malta.
Of course.
Hi everyone, my name is Davinia Kutajar from Malta. I'm a partner at a law firm in Malta called WH Partners, which specializes in fintech and gaming, and that's why I'm here today. And my areas of specialization are corporate, commercial, and compliance law. And with this panel, we're going to touch upon issues of money laundering, and I'm looking forward to contributing some ideas there.
Thank you so much. So this is our panel. I'm going to be looking at all the different areas and hopefully lifting the lid off the challenges that you might be finding. And we may have some time for some questions later on as well. So let's just start off with the first question, which is really about the fact that since COVID has kind of disappeared, at least in the masking business, is there still increased online activity now that people are out and about and doing things?
Yes, I believe definitely. There's still remote working. I think COVID, one of its possibly only advantages is that people started working remotely from all over the world. And business activities and transactions and transfer of currency, including cryptocurrency, has been facilitated. So even though measures have been relaxed to diminish the impact of COVID, I still feel and believe that there's still a lot of online and remote working being carried out.
Davinia, would you say the same about that? Do you think there's a large amount of people than before, or about the same activity?
Yes, kind of leading on from what Franklin said, I think whereas before we would unplug, now it's like we're always plugged in because we're home, we're online, we speak to our colleagues all the time. And I think it's accelerated the experience we were having before, and we're kind of more savvy now as well, because even if we didn't really know much about online and online payments, we had to find out. I started doing something silly, but I started doing online shopping because of the COVID pandemic. So let's imagine the repercussions that this has had from something small like online shopping onto basically everything else that has to do with social life.
Well, here's the thing. Before, my only fears about going online as far as cybercrime was related was two things. First of all, the dreaded ransomware, and also the fact that I might be related to a Nigerian prince who's going to give me $500 million if I don't send
They
a
never
message
sent
back.
you $500 million?
Yeah, he didn't like me very much. I was the smaller person in the family, so I only get $500 million. But without that, I wasn't worried about anything. But now, there's so much more. Could you just highlight the challenges that you come across that people should be a bit more aware of the activities that happen online?
Yeah, sure. I mean, from my experience, so at a point I was advising and acting as a compliance officer for a payment services institution in Malta. And we're noticing an increase in crypto and payments and new tokens being issued. And there was a lot of hacking and a lot of fraud because the scams started being more elaborate with more new tokens being issued on a daily basis. So of course, criminality increased. Increased because people wanted to start investing in high-yield, exotic tokens, which were being issued on a daily basis. And the problem with that, not just from a cybersecurity threat, but also from an investment point of view, a lot of people started trusting these crypto tokens and cryptocurrency very, very blindly without seeking advice from professionals. They would invest their life savings, for example, and they would invest, I don't know, 30K in just one without consulting any investment advisors and without reading the prospectus or the white paper of a particular token. So that's really increased, and this I think was pre-COVID, but with COVID and these new tokens, you know, I can invest from the comfort of my sofa. Increased criminality and there was more scam being around. So I think people should be a bit more careful, especially investors, retail investors who do not know anything about how to invest, and especially investing in exotic cryptocurrency as well.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there. There's so many people who I bump into at events like this, for instance, where they say, I've got this amazing new coin for you. This coin's brilliant. And you say to them, so what do you do before you start getting into this? Oh, I worked at McDonald's. And you're thinking, you haven't got a massive history of this, and it's a big problem. Now, the thing is, Davinia, I know that money laundering is being sent through a lot of these different channels. We might not even know it's happening. So, can you explain a bit more about that?
Look, the trick with money laundering is that the launderers are always a step ahead. They are professional, they are not slow and stupid, and the authorities and companies are always playing catch-up. So that is the reality. And whilst some might have unlimited budgets, others have rather small budgets to combat this problem. And we see this not only in private companies, but also in different governments. Not all governments have the same budgets to combat money laundering. And then we have this, again, ripple effect all the way down to the companies that are in these jurisdictions. Money laundering remains top of the agenda of the European Union, the Financial Action Task Force, and probably a lot of the companies that are represented at this event will tell you that compliance, and anti-money laundering compliance are probably 50% of what they discuss at their board meetings. So definitely top of the agenda because it is a real problem that we are facing, especially with emerging technologies that, if we're honest, most people do not understand.
Well, I'm just about holding on with my fingernails, and that's why I want to deep dive into this whole challenge. When we're talking about the fact that people don't really understand it, and you've got governments, and you've got all sorts of organizations, where does a jurisdiction start and end? Because if you find yourself at the sharp end of some kind of scam or hack, and all your money's gone, that trail could be traveling all around the world. How are you ever going to get your money back, and who do you sue, and who do you go to start that process going?
I think You should always start, when looking at a particular jurisdiction, you should start by looking whether a particular activity is licensed or not. So, for example, cryptocurrency and virtual financial assets, I can give the example of Malta, for example. We have a whole framework, a whole legislation and the authorities. The fact that an activity is licensed by a regulator in a particular jurisdiction will give added protection to the investor. So, from a point of view of an investor, you should always look at, see if a company is licensed or not. Because if it's licensed, it's being supervised by an authority. The authority is making checks, the authority is making compliance visits, it's checking that, and there are remedies for the investors as well. You can complain to the authority. As an investor, you can complain to the authority. You can lodge an action against the company which defrauded you as well. So it's important that when you look at jurisdictions, you see if the activity is licensed, who is the regulator, guidelines issued by the regulator, public seminars as well. And this shows that a jurisdiction is serious about regulating a particular activity, regulating the activity in this context of the crypto industry.
But when you're looking at something like that, sorry, I just want to get back on this whole thing. Right now, somebody can come up to you and show you their business card that could say FBI on it. And they've got it printed at the printer down the road. How do you check out that the people you're talking to are legit? Because anybody can say anything, and it's only on what they say to you and how convincing they are, and a little bit of Googling, that you're making a decision that's probably the best or the worst decision on your life. Davinia, how do you give us the 1, 2, 3 things we need to look out for?
Not that easy, I'm afraid. It starts with education, as with most things. When you have a new technology, governments and independent societies, and I would say there's also an obligation on the companies that promote these sort of new technologies, have to educate the public. There is a legal and moral obligation on this. Now, it depends on the technology. If we're talking about blockchain technology and NFTs, it's a plethora of subjects, and you need to know what you are doing. Or else you need, as Franklin said, to use a service that is licensed, because the fact that it is licensed will give you the comfort that you need, that if you are not very savvy, hopefully there's a watchdog that's doing that for you. But with all technologies, you cannot blame how it is used as a way to stifle progress. Had we done this with the telephone, we would not have gotten mobile phones, we would not be where we are today. We never blamed the telephone for what people said on it. So I don't want to ever have a discussion of suppressing a technology because of its dangers. Let's think of the internet. I remember when internet was introduced, there was this fear that strangers would find out where we live. I was like 16 at the time, so it was a legitimate concern, and my parents would tell me, be careful who you're talking to, etc. Nowadays, we call an Uber and we jump into a car with a total stranger, which would have been unthinkable when the internet started.
Well, if a total stranger runs a taxi, that's true for me, but not just general. But no, I know what you mean. So here's the thing, right? Sorry, you're going to say, Franklin. You're going to say something.
Just to add as well. I mean, to also further to what Davinia was saying and to answer further your question. Nowadays, the internet is such a powerful tool. For example, as a money laundering reporting officer, when someone comes to me for a service and I treat him as a customer, the first thing I do, apart from requesting a copy of his passport or identity card, is perform a Google search with the name, surname, and then I use taglines. So Franklin Cachia plus money laundering plus fraud, and I see if there are any results. There are also softwares as well which screen the individuals against sanctions, against PEP, politically exposed persons, whether the person committed a crime. So nowadays it's so easy to find whether the individual is a criminal or not. There's so much public information and so many databases, also biometrics as well, that companies use. So I think there is a safe way how you can use cybersecurity to protect against criminality and fraud and money laundering.
But let's take it from the other side. How many people here have started up a new business or are in the middle of having a new business? 1, 2, 3, a couple of people here. So all these people here starting up a new business, they've come along to connect with potential investors, to launch a team, to see what joint ventures they can put together. When they're going out there and doing it, to many people, they're going to think, well, you've got a half-baked idea. Not that you have, I'm sure yours is perfect, but you've got a half-baked idea. Is it a scam? Is it real? It's really difficult for a startup to be able to show credibility because it's a chicken and egg situation. What comes first, the millions in the bank or showing you've got millions in the bank? It's got to happen somehow.
A lot of startups, in fact, are using what I would call these sort of celebrity influencers or even celebrity investors to give them credibility. It's actually a new sort of revenue stream for them. You get the right people to invest with you and suddenly you are credible.
Yes.
So if anybody's looking for, a celebrity to connect with, I know a load of people. No, I'm joking, Kerem.
I think this links as well. For startups to gain that credibility, they would opt for a jurisdiction which license such activity. Because I think from a point of view of an investor, I'd rather invest in a startup which is licensed by a regulator because there's more safety and more investor protection rather than in a jurisdiction where it's unregulated and there's no one to protect me if something goes wrong, for example. So this links to identifying as a startup the right jurisdiction to attract your investors.
But with that,
if I may add to that,
sorry,
then sometimes for a startup, regulation is a barrier to entry because
That's
of
true.
the costs.
Yes, that's
So
true.
it's not always the right fit, and there should be some jurisdiction shopping as well, because different jurisdictions, as you well know, regulate differently and to different levels. So definitely regulation being one way to give yourself credibility, but definitely not the only way. And we've seen startups going nuclear without necessarily investing heavily in regulation at the onset, and then migrating to a more heavily regulated jurisdiction when they had established themselves.
But here's the thing, when you've got influencers or you haven't got influencers, I don't want to use the term Ponzi scheme. However, there are a lot. And a lot of businesses, especially in the coin world, start up building up this profile, building up people that follow, and they look as legitimate as they get until somebody pulls the rug from under it. Is that possible to see that from a mile off? Do you see these coming a mile off, or do you see them later?
I wouldn't say it's easy to see from a mile off, because people nowadays are very good at creating an online persona that can be very deceiving, but you can look at their track record, pushing, for instance, startups to certain levels and then pulling out because they've done their bits. There are business angel networks that we can look at as well. These would be networks that put together startups and business angels with incredible reputations to give you that extra push that you would need.
So we've looked at a couple of different areas so far. We've covered the challenges facing anybody who wants to get into launching their business. We've talked about the dangers of money laundering. Where do you think all this is going in the future? Because this is just the beginning, baby. As people are getting more digitized, platforms, everything that's being connected, where do you see this going to be a danger in the future? And are there any red flags that people should be looking out for that maybe haven't arrived yet, as experts?
In my opinion, I think over-regulation. So it's difficult. none of us have a crystal ball, but definitely over-regulation can jeopardize new businesses and new ventures. So I think the future has to be the right balance, which is easier said than done, but it has to be the right balance between innovation and technology and regulation. I think the most important thing is that consumers and investors are protected, and they are given as well remedy in the event that a business goes wrong, or there's fraud, there's Ponzi schemes. I think that's where we should be heading, and that's the future that we should walk through.
So you're saying that people could get their money back in the future if they've invested in these kind of challenges and these Ponzi's?
Yes, there will definitely be remedies to get their money back. The question is how and when, but yes, there should be remedies, and this is part of the compliance framework in having a robust compliance framework in a company to make sure that investor protection is given.
Well, the same question then. Davinia, when you working with people and you're challenging the laundering, the money laundering, what is the success rate of people getting their money back when they've lost to these programs?
Look, from experience, it can be very hard to get your money back because you start coming up against all sorts of walls, from jurisdictional barriers to failures in the system, failure of communication or cooperation even between authorities. And I'm from Malta, and we're part of the EU, so we should have a lot of seamless cooperation, and still it's an uphill struggle. So as soon as you go EU, non-EU, the struggles are enormous. So we're not there yet, and I hazard to say some companies will veer towards regulation because of the prestige it gives you, but there will always be startups that are hungry, cannot afford regulation, and will always find jurisdictions that will welcome them.
So we've got time for maybe one question from the audience. Anybody got a question that they want to ask our experts? Because I know that a lot of people were fascinated by it, but there must be something that you... Because the lawyers, they're free now. So now's the time, if you wanted to ask that question, would be the ideal time to do it. Seeing as everyone's working it through...
We don't do divorce.
Don't do divorce. Okay, in that case, I won't come to you yet. We can delete that, can't we? Right, here's the thing. Right now, cybercrime and hacking is being weaponized by countries. I won't mention where, but we're all very aware. That's kind of scary when those guys stop attacking countries and go, right, I'm bored now, let's go back to individuals. How big is that problem?
I think they just redirected their energies. They were there, they are there, and they will always be there.
How big is it, though? How big is that? Do you know any idea how many hackers there are out there who are deliberately being part of this organized crime online?
No, I think they run in millions, you know. But this links as well to the choice of jurisdiction. A serious jurisdiction will invest in having a proper ICT framework and cybersecurity. Not just a serious jurisdiction, but also a serious company which focuses a lot on innovation. Cybersecurity has to be paramount, you know, which once again protects investors, protects the customers. And I think there's a lot of investment being carried out on cybersecurity by all startup companies and also more senior companies as well.
One final question. So right now, at many events or anywhere, people come up to you, business card, I've got a cryptocurrency, I've got an NFT, invest in me, blah, blah, blah. Now, a lot of the connection gets made through Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Can they be held accountable for carrying that introduction or especially if it comes through an advert, or are you on your own? If something happens for a connection you met through the platforms.
For most of them, I'm afraid you're on your own.
Exactly.
I hate to be the
Exactly.
deliverer of bad news, but it's the truth.
So Mark Zuckerberg isn't sweating at this moment. in time.
No. I don't think social media platforms can be held accountable. It's up to the consumer to be responsible enough to seek advice, professional advice, before investing into exotic exotic instruments, like new tokens or new cryptocurrency.
Well, I'm kind of worried, but I know that we are in safe hands as long as we go through you two before we do anything. I would urge everybody to connect with these guys. You got any questions that you didn't want to ask earlier, but you do want to ask, then make sure that you do as well. A round of applause, please, for our wonderful experts on stage, Davini Cachia and Franklin Cachia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.